Before we begin, we publish new content every day. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You want to know the exact moment I realized I had become invisible in my own life. It wasn't when my mother chose a spa weekend over my cancer scare. It wasn't even when my sister posted selfies from Bali while I sat alone in a hospital waiting room. It was when the nurse asked if I had anyone to call, and I genuinely couldn't think of a single person who would drop everything for me the way I had dropped everything for everyone else for 30 years. My name is Elisa, and at 50, I thought I had figured out what love looked like. It looked like saying yes when you wanted to say no. It looked like emptying your retirement account to save your sister's failing wellness business. It looked like smiling through Thanksgiving dinners where your accomplishments were footnotes to other people's stories. I was wrong about everything. The morning that changed everything started like any other Tuesday. I had been putting off the doctor's appointment for months, telling myself the persistent pain was just stress, just age, just anything other than what it might actually be. My mother Brenda had been staying with me for 2 weeks, recovering from what she called a minor procedure but what was actually a cosmetic touch-up she couldn't afford. My sister Chloe had been texting me daily about her latest financial crisis, something about a business loan payment that was due. I sat in Dr. Martinez's office that morning, my hands folded in my lap like a schoolgirl, listening to words that seemed to float around me without quite landing. Ovarian mass. Immediate biopsy needed. Possible malignancy. The words felt heavy and light at the same time, like stones made of air. I need someone to drive me home after the procedure, Dr. Martinez was saying. The anesthesia will make it unsafe for me to operate a vehicle for several hours. Did I have someone who could stay with me for the rest of the day? Of course, I told him. Of course I had someone. The lie came so easily I almost believed it myself. I walked to my car in the hospital parking lot, my phone already in my hand. The family group chat had been quiet for days, unusual for us. I typed the message 3 times before sending it, each version softer than the last. Mom and Chloe, I have a medical procedure scheduled for Friday the 12th. The doctor says I need someone to drive me home and stay with me for a few hours afterward while the anesthesia wears off. Is either of you available to help? The response came faster than I expected, but not from the person I hoped. Chloe's message arrived with a photo attached. She was at LAX, champagne flute in one hand, boarding pass in the other, her smile radiant under the airport lighting. OMG sis, are you serious right now? Mom and I are literally boarding our flight to Bali. This is my healing retreat, remember? The one I told you about. You can totally just take an Uber home. It's not like it's major surgery or anything. Already manifesting the most amazing energy for this trip. #blessed, #Bali bound. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over until the words started to blur. Not from tears, I realized. From something else entirely. Something that felt like clarity. My mother's response came 20 minutes later, after their flight had already taken off. Elisa, honey, you know how important this trip is for my mental health. Dr. Patterson said, I need to focus on positive energy right now, and your negative vibrations could really interfere with my healing process. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do. Try not to worry so much. Stress causes wrinkles. I sat in my Honda Civic in the Whole Foods parking lot, reading these messages from the 2 people I had restructured my entire life around, and something inside me just stopped. Not broke, stopped. Like a clock that had been ticking for so long you forgot it was there. Until suddenly the house was silent. I had spent $20,000 of my own money paying off Chloe's credit card debt last year. I had taken a second mortgage on my house to loan her the funds for her wellness coaching certification program. I had spent my vacation days helping her move apartments 4 times in 2 years. I had listened to hours of her complaints about men who didn't appreciate her, jobs that didn't fulfill her, friends who didn't support her dreams. I had spent $15,000 renovating my mother's kitchen because she said cooking in her old space was depressing her. I had driven her to every doctor's appointment for the past 5 years, waiting in lobby chairs while she described her symptoms in elaborate detail to anyone who would listen. I had hosted every holiday, bought every gift, sent every card, made every phone call. And when I needed them to show up for one afternoon, they were sipping cocktails at 30,000 feet. I deleted both messages without responding and drove home. The next morning, my neighbor Mark was watering his roses when I stepped outside to get the mail. Mark was one of those people who had lived on the same street for decades. The kind of man who still waved at strangers and remembered everyone's birthdays. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier, and since then he had thrown himself into his garden with the dedication of someone who needed beautiful things to grow. "You look tired, Elisa," he said, turning off his hose. "Everything okay?" I was tired. I was tired in ways I was only beginning to understand. But Mark had his own grief to carry, and I had learned long ago not to burden people with my problems. "Just some medical stuff," I said. "Nothing serious." He studied my face for a moment, and I saw something I didn't recognize right away. It was concern, but not the kind that expected something from me in return. Not the kind that came with conditions or expiration dates. "You need someone to drive you anywhere?" he asked. "I'm retired, remember. Got nothing but time and a very reliable Buick." The kindness in his voice almost undid me. When was the last time someone had offered to help me without me asking first? When was the last time someone had noticed I might need help at all? "I wouldn't want to impose," I said, the words automatic as breathing. "Elisa," he said gently, "when's the last time you imposed on anyone?" I couldn't answer him because I couldn't remember. I had spent so much of my life making sure I never asked for too much, never needed too much, never took up too much space. I had become an expert at shrinking myself to fit into the corners of other people's lives. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of December day that makes you want to stay in bed indefinitely. Mark picked me up at 7:30, NPR playing softly on his radio, a thermos of coffee waiting in the cup holder for me. He didn't try to fill the silence with optimistic chatter or ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. He just drove, steady and calm, while I watched the familiar streets pass by. The procedure took longer than expected. When I woke up in recovery, groggy and sore, Mark was there reading a paperback novel, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He had brought me ginger tea in a thermos and saltine crackers, the kind of thoughtful details that spoke of experience with taking care of someone. "How are you feeling?" he asked, closing his book. "Like I've been turned inside out," I said, which was true in more ways than one. "That's normal," he said. "Susan used to say the hardest part wasn't the procedure itself, but the waiting for results afterward." We drove home slowly, Mark taking the corners carefully to avoid jostling me. He helped me into my house, made sure I had water and medication within reach, and settled into my living room armchair like he planned to stay. "You don't have to babysit me," I said. "I'm not babysitting," he said. "I'm keeping a friend company. There's a difference." A friend. When was the last time someone had called me that? Really called me that, not as a placeholder for someone more convenient or useful? Later that afternoon, while Mark dozed in the chair and I drifted in and out of medication-induced sleep, my phone began to ring. Not my mother or sister checking on me. The hospital. But they weren't calling for me. They were calling about me. "Mrs. Chen. This is Patricia from St. Mary's Patient Relations Department. We received a call from a woman claiming to be your mother, asking about your procedure today. I want you to know we didn't release any information, but she seemed quite upset that we couldn't confirm details about your condition." My mother had called the hospital, not to check on me, but to check on what people might think if they knew she wasn't here. "What exactly did she want to know?" I asked. "She wanted to know if you had been discharged safely and if you had someone to care for you. She mentioned being out of state and needing to manage the family's response to concerned relatives." Manage the family's response. Even from 3,000 miles away, she was trying to control the narrative, to make sure her abandonment of me didn't reflect poorly on her image as a devoted mother. "Thank you for calling," I told Patricia. "And thank you for protecting my privacy." After I hung up, Mark opened his eyes and looked at me with the kind of understanding that comes from having lived long enough to recognize patterns. "Family trouble?" he asked quietly. "Something like that," I said. He nodded and didn't push for details, but I found myself wanting to tell him. Maybe it was the medication. Or maybe it was the relief of having someone sit with me who expected nothing in return. But the words started coming. I told him about the messages from Bali, about the years of financial support that was never acknowledged or appreciated, about the way my achievements were always overshadowed by other people's needs, about how I had become the family's emotional and financial insurance policy, always there to solve problems and provide support, never quite worth the same investment in return. Mark listened without interrupting, without offering solutions or trying to minimize what I was saying. He just listened. And somehow that was exactly what I needed. You know what the worst part is? I said finally. I trained them to treat me this way. I said yes so many times that they stopped thinking no was even an option for me. That's not your fault, Mark said. Generous people often attract people who take advantage of generosity. The question is what you want to do about it now, what I wanted to do about it. I had been so focused on what everyone else needed from me that I had forgotten I had wants of my own, choices of my own, power of my own. The next few days passed quietly. Mark checked on me each morning, bringing soup or tea or just conversation. I began to notice things I had been too busy to see before. The way the light changed throughout the day in my living room, the sound of rain on my roof, the weight of silence when it wasn't filled with other people's demands. My phone remained mostly quiet. A few texts from Chloe about the amazing energy of Bali and how the universe was really speaking to her there. Nothing from my mother, which was somehow worse than if she had tried to justify her absence. On Tuesday, 6 days after my procedure, they called back from Bali. I was making myself lunch, moving slowly but feeling stronger, when my phone erupted with calls and messages. Chloe first, then my mother, then Chloe again. I let them go to voicemail, finishing my sandwich before I listened to the messages. Chloe's voice was tight with panic. Elisa, you need to call me back right now. Some blogger is writing horrible lies about me and they're using your medical thing as proof that I'm a bad person. I'm losing followers and sponsors are asking questions. This is ruining my career. You need to fix this. My mother's message was longer and more manipulative. Elisa, honey, I know you're upset with us, but this public humiliation needs to stop immediately. People are saying terrible things about our family online, and it's affecting my reputation in the community. I raised you better than this. Call me. I had no idea what they were talking about. So I did what any 50-year-old woman would do. I Googled my sister's name. The article was the third result. The headline read, "The Dark Side of Self-Care. When Wellness Influencers Abandon Family in Crisis." Someone, apparently a nurse or hospital staff member, had shared Chloe's social media posts from the day of my procedure with a blogger who specialized in exposing the contradictions of lifestyle influencers. The contrast was stark. Chloe's champagne and crystals posts from Bali timestamped just hours after I had told them about my medical emergency. The article didn't mention my name or give specific details about my procedure, but it painted a clear picture of someone who preached family values and sisterly love while abandoning a sibling in need. The comments section was brutal, filled with people sharing their own stories of being let down by family members who prioritized their image over their relationships. I sat at my kitchen table reading the article twice, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense that the universe had finally balanced a scale I hadn't even realized was tilted. My phone rang again. This time I answered. "Elisa." Chloe's voice was shrill with desperation. "You have to help me. This is destroying everything I've worked for. People are calling me a fake and a narcissist. Brands are dropping me. You need to post something saying this is all lies and that we're a close family." I listened to her words, heard the familiar expectation that I would sacrifice myself to solve her problem, and felt something new rise up in me. Not anger exactly. Clarity. "Chloe," I said quietly, "what part of the article was a lie?" The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I could hear her breathing. "That's not the point," she said finally. "The point is that you're letting strangers ruin my life over one stupid mistake." One mistake. That's what she called choosing a vacation over my cancer scare. One mistake. "I'm not letting anyone do anything," I said. "I didn't write that article and I didn't send them your social media posts. You posted those yourself, in a public forum, at the exact time I needed your support. The consequences of that choice are yours to handle. But I'm your sister, she said. And now she was crying. You're supposed to protect me, and you were supposed to show up for me, I replied. But here we are. I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked her number. My mother called 30 minutes later. Elisa Marie Henderson, she said, using my full name like I was 12 years old. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this vindictive behavior stops now. You will fix this situation with your sister immediately. No, I said, the word feeling foreign and wonderful in my mouth. I won't. Excuse me? I said no, Mom. I won't fix this. I won't pretend that what happened was acceptable. I won't sacrifice my dignity to protect Chloe's reputation. And I won't be spoken to like a child by someone who chose a spa vacation over her daughter's health crisis. You don't understand the position this puts me in with my friends, she said. Do you know how embarrassing this is for me? And there it was. The truth that had been hiding under 30 years of guilt and obligation. It wasn't about love or family or doing the right thing. It was about her image, her comfort, her convenience. I had been performing the role of devoted daughter and sister, not because it was reciprocated, but because it made them look good. Mom, I said, and my voice was steadier than I had ever heard it. I'm going to hang up now. When you're ready to apologize for abandoning me when I needed you most, you can call me back. But I won't be accepting any more criticism from someone who wasn't here. I hung up and blocked her number too. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in decades, my phone wasn't buzzing with demands or complaints or crises that required my immediate attention. The quiet felt enormous, like standing in a cathedral. That evening, Mark knocked on my door with a casserole and a bottle of wine. Rough day? He asked, taking in what must have been my shell-shocked expression. I told him about the article, the phone calls, the decisions I had made. He listened with the same patient attention he had shown all week, nodding occasionally, but not interrupting. How do you feel? He asked when I finished. Free, I said, and realized it was true. Terrified and guilty and sad but free. Good, he said. Freedom's scary at first, but it beats the alternative. We ate dinner together and talked about his garden, about the books he was reading, about places he wanted to travel now that he was retired. Normal conversation between two adults who enjoyed each other's company. No crisis to solve, no drama to navigate, no emotional labor to perform, just dinner and wine and the radical notion that my presence alone was enough. The next few weeks blurred together in the strangest way. Without the constant interruption of family emergencies and demands, I found myself with time I didn't know how to fill. I had grown so accustomed to defining myself through my usefulness to others that I had forgotten who I was when no one needed anything from me. I started small. I read books I had been meaning to read for years. I took walks through my neighborhood and noticed details I had been too hurried to see before. I cooked meals for one person and didn't feel guilty about the lack of leftovers. Mark became a regular presence, stopping by in the evenings or joining me for coffee in the mornings. Our friendship developed naturally, without pressure or expectation. He told me about his marriage to Susan, about the grief of losing her, about the way he was learning to build a life that honored her memory without being defined entirely by her absence. I told him about my dreams from before my family's needs had consumed my attention, how I had wanted to teach elementary school but had gone into accounting because it paid better and my family needed financial support. How I had always imagined having children but had never found the right partner because I was too busy managing everyone else's relationships. You talk about those dreams like they're dead, Mark said one evening as we sat on my porch watching the sunset. But you're 50, not 90. You could still teach if you wanted to. You could still have the life you imagined. The idea seemed impossible at first. I had spent so many years seeing myself as supporting cast in other people's stories that starring in my own felt presumptuous. But the seed was planted, and seeds have a way of growing even in unexpected soil. 3 weeks after I had blocked my family's numbers, I got a call from an unknown local number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Elisa? It was my mother's voice, but smaller somehow. Less commanding, I'm calling from your Aunt Janet's phone because I know you blocked me. I could hang up, I realized. I had that power now. I have 5 minutes, I said instead. What do you want to say? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she had hung up. I want to say I'm sorry, she said finally. And she was crying. I want to say that I was wrong to leave you alone during your procedure, and I was wrong to be more worried about what people would think than whether you were okay. It wasn't the apology I had imagined receiving. It wasn't accompanied by excuses or justifications or requests for immediate forgiveness. It was just acknowledgement, plain and simple, of the harm she had caused. Thank you, I said. I accept your apology. Can we talk more? She asked. Can I see you? I'm not ready for that yet, I said. But maybe someday. I understand, she said. I love you, Elisa. I know I haven't shown it well, but I do love you. I love you too, Mom. But love isn't enough anymore. I need respect and consideration and reciprocity. When you're ready to offer those things, we can try again. After I hung up, I sat on my porch for a long time thinking about love and how I had defined it. I had equated love with sacrifice, with saying yes, with making myself smaller so others could be bigger. But real love, I was beginning to understand, required boundaries and honesty, and the courage to disappoint people when disappointing them was the right thing to do. Chloe never called. I heard through the family grapevine that she had moved back in with our mother. Her influencer career effectively over. Part of me felt guilty about her downfall, but a larger part of me recognized that I hadn't caused her problems. I had simply stopped solving them for her. 4 months after my procedure, I got the news I had been simultaneously hoping for and dreading. The biopsy was benign. No cancer, no ongoing treatment needed, no life-threatening crisis to navigate. Just a wake-up call that had saved my life in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. That evening, Mark and I celebrated with dinner at the Italian restaurant downtown. It felt like a real date, our first. Though we had been building toward this moment for months without naming it. You know what's funny? I said over dessert. I spent so many years afraid of being alone that I never realized how much I needed solitude to figure out who I was. And who are you? He asked, smiling. I'm still figuring that out, I said. But I know I'm someone worth showing up for. 6 months later, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I quit my job as an accountant and enrolled in a teaching certification program. At 50 years old, I was going back to school to pursue the dream I had set aside decades earlier. My mother and I had begun talking again, carefully and with clear boundaries. She was learning to relate to me as an adult rather than as an extension of herself. And I was learning to love her without sacrificing my own well-being. It was harder than our old dynamic but infinitely more honest. Chloe and I remained estranged, though I heard she was working at a local yoga studio and seemed to be building a quieter, more authentic life. I wished her well from a distance and protected my peace by maintaining that distance. Mark and I were taking things slowly, building something real and sustainable. He understood my need for independence and I understood his grief process. We were two people who had learned that love was better when it was chosen daily, rather than assumed or demanded. On a Tuesday evening in late spring, exactly 1 year after my procedure, I was grading papers from my student teaching placement when my phone rang. An unknown number but local. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Elisa? The voice was hesitant, younger than I expected. This is going to sound weird, but I'm a nursing student at St. Mary's. I was there the day of your procedure last year, and I wanted to thank you. Thank me, I said, confused. I was the one who sent your sister's posts to that blogger, she said in a rush. I know I could get in trouble for telling you this, but watching you sit alone in that recovery room while she posted champagne photos from Bali made me so angry. My grandmother died alone because her family was too busy to visit, and I just couldn't stand seeing someone else be treated like they didn't matter. I sat quietly for a moment, processing this information. What you did changed everything for me, I said finally, in ways you couldn't have known. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. You're welcome, she said. I hope you're doing better now. I am, I said. Much better. After we hung up, I looked around my small apartment, at the lesson plans scattered across my table, at the photos of my new teaching colleagues on my refrigerator, at the life I was building one deliberate choice at a time. I had learned that being invisible in your own life wasn't a natural consequence of aging or circumstances. It was a choice, repeated daily, to prioritize other people's comfort over your own existence. And like any choice, it could be unmade. I was no longer invisible. I was 50 years old and finally, fully present in my own story, not as a supporting character or a problem solver or a source of unconditional resources, but as the protagonist of a life worth living. That night, I called Mark and asked if he wanted to come over for dinner, not because I needed company or because I was lonely, but because I enjoyed his presence and wanted to share my evening with him. When he arrived with flowers from his garden and a bottle of wine, I realized this was what love looked like when it was freely given, rather than desperately sought. It looked like two people choosing each other, again and again, without keeping score or demanding proof, or threatening to leave if their needs weren't met perfectly. As we cooked together in my small kitchen, laughing about his attempts to follow my grandmother's pasta recipe, I thought about that woman who had sat alone in the recovery room a year ago, convinced that she had no one to call who would drop everything for her. She had been wrong, but not in the way she thought. She did have someone who would drop everything for her, who would show up without conditions or expectations, who would prioritize her well-being above all else. That someone was herself. It had taken 50 years and a cancer scare and the loss of relationships I thought I couldn't live without. But I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. The person you need to show up for first and most consistently is yourself. Everything else is just extra grace.